saw a little bit of my digital counterpart. I want to know in the room today, I'm going to get some energy kind of going back. As Monique said, I know I'm standing between you and some more glucose. So I want you to stand up right now if you have a digital avatar that's in your operations today that you're using. Anyone? Okay, let's try something else then. How many of you are using ChatGPT today? Stand up. Let's get a little energy in the room. Now, when I asked this question 2 years ago, do you know how many people would have stood up? Maybe about 25%. And even that, I think maybe they were just, trying out and playing with it. But look around this room. We have almost 100% of people today, when we talk about using AI, we talk about ChatGPT. All right, you guys can go ahead and take a seat. So what I want to do today is talk about, I'm a researcher, but I think as you're going to see through some of the data today, all of our systems are blinking red that there is a problem today with work. And so there's one profound academic question that we're going to answer today together over the next 45 minutes, and that is WTF is going on in the workplace today. So today, as much as this has been about heady, I actually want to take a moment and actually now speak to your heart as a leader. Because as I work around the world with executives across all industries, here's what I see happening today. Leaders are running around like chickens with their heads cut off, trying to put on oxygen mask of their workforce without putting on their own. Does that resonate with you? Do you feel like as a leader right now that you are doing too much, that your level of responsibility has gotten too much, you're doing more with less, and that maybe the challenges that you're facing have become actually more complicated, more human, more messy? And so what I want to invite you to do with me today over the next 45 minutes is to put on your own oxygen mask. We're going to talk through the nuances of change that's knocking at your doorstep. But to do so, I think it's really important to consider what's actually different today. So as a researcher, I get the opportunity to read board meeting notes and conference meeting and association meeting notes. And I came across this recently. These were the top 5 concerns that were keeping up executives up at night in their industry. Number 1, it's so hard to find talent, really skilled talent, people who actually want to work. Number 1 problem that was facing their industry. Number 2, technology is moving too fast. We can't keep up with it as leaders. Our workforce can't keep up with it. Our customers are even adopting it faster than we are. We don't know what to do with this new technology. Number 3, not enough, any HR people, not enough budget for HR, not enough training and development, where that budget seems to be decreasing year over year. Let's talk about young people. Where are the young people and why don't they want to work? That was also a hotly contested topic during this meeting. And finally, maybe one of my favorite is that we've got technically strong managers who have no clue how to manage the hearts and minds of their people. So I'm going to start with this side of the room. I'm just going to ask you to shout out a number. What year do you think this list was compiled? 1980? Over here? 90s? 1990s? 2025? 1960s? All right, if this was The Price is Right, everyone has bid way too high. This was actually 1955 this meeting occurred, okay? 1955. And as a future of work researcher, this sort of thing makes me want to flip tables from a stage because nearly 75 years later, we are still talking about this. So as much as technology, and we are going to continue to be wowed by technology, and I'm going to go through and tell you, you saw a little bit of the digital avatar. AI is here, and it's coming, and it's so much more than ChatGPT, and it's certainly something to be feared. I fear this more, though, than the technology coming, that we don't continue to get the people side of our management right alongside all of the changes. And that's what I want to help you do today, is actually recognize, why is this so hard to get right? Why does there seem to be angst in the younger generation workforce coming in? And I want to bring you some of the data and research and stories to help you navigate, so when you go back into your hotels and into your organizations, you at least maybe have a little bit more empathy or understanding of what's happening today. And here's the consequence of this. The 70+ years of us not being able to figure this out, here's what's happening. Do you know today only 30% of your workforce actually aspires to be in your seats? I've never seen a number like this before. Majority of generations are trying to climb that corporate ladder, are trying to actually come up to leadership position. But something is happening where peers and your workers are looking around and saying, I don't want that job. That's not worth the extra money, is what I'm hearing more and more. So what I actually think we have today, and what I think AI is actually illuminating, is a leadership crisis. People no longer actually want to lead, and that's a problem. Second thing is, and this should keep us all up at night as Americans, only 30% of leaders think the next generation is going to be better off. Or in other words, 70% of those of us actually don't think we're leaving the workforce better than the one that we inherited. It's the very first time, Gallup runs this research, the very first time that we've seen this flip, the majority of people actually think they're leaving the workforce better than when they inherited. This should begin to keep us up at night because this begins to bleed into society level issues if we don't start course correcting this. And Mike had this stat here too, so it's a good thing our numbers match. But what we see happening is with all this fancy technology we have, we are actually decreasing the lifespans of our organizations, not increasing it. That's a paradox. We should be having organizations that are more sustainable, that are able to actually survive, and what's happening is that's shrinking. And when organizations move off the S&P 500 or organizations consolidate, that means job loss. There is a 100% correlation with a company coming off the S&P 500, either going out of business, filing bankruptcy, being acquired, and/or job loss. And you see the headlines today. Job loss continues to be one of the #1 concerns that we have, which again is so puzzling because we have more intelligence and more technology than ever before. And not just that, the instability that's happening within our organizations. 33%, 1 in 3 CEOs will leave within 3 years of their position. It's a lot of turnover and a lot of instability that's happening on top. So point #1 I want to make today is this. The old leadership playbook is no longer working, and it's actually breaking. And so I want you to take a look at these statements and see if you see yourself in any of these. We're going to talk through this. These statements worked. The old leadership playbook worked for many decades, but it's beginning to fail us in this moment. #1, old belief, stability is success. How many of you still do any sort of long-term planning, 3 to 5 year? Anyone still doing 3 to 5 year forecasts? True story, coming from the tech industry, we went from 18-month roadmaps, 12-month roadmaps. Most recently, we started doing 6-month roadmaps. The problem is you're in a constant planning phase and very little execution phase. But that's because there's so much uncertainty today and we cannot find our footing and figure out what does stability look like. So 3 to 5 year plans almost become somewhat silly in this environment because we don't even know what the next 6 months is going to hold. #2, big one, control ensures performance. Any of you that went and got an MBA, the whole entire MBA program is built on controlling and command and making sure that you've got compliance and regulation in place to make sure people that don't really want to work will work and show up the right way. This is going to be an outdated model of leadership. #3, expertise equals credibility. This is going to be a really big one. We're going to spend some time on this today with AI. The one thing that AI is democratizing, which provides amazing opportunity, but it also limits us as leaders, is your expertise. And you heard my digital avatar, who's starting to get a little sassy lately, say this, but it's true. What took me 10 years to go get my doctorate degree in? ChatGPT, with the right prompts, you can find that same level of information within minutes. And that's the reality that we're operating on. So what do I then bring as a leader if my 10 years of education is beginning to be democratized and even commoditized? What does that make me as a leader, and how do I actually start to show up and behave? 4th thing is efficiency drives value. We have become so obsessed with efficiency in a way that I can't even understand as someone who studies organizational performance. Efficiency is important, but it's not the North Star of why you operate. I don't know of any leader who starts in their position and says, I cannot wait to drive the most efficient organization. I can't wait to create burnout in my workforce because we're going to move so fast. I mean, anyone? I would be curious. Would love to talk to you afterwards. But most people get into leadership because they want to create, they want to contribute, they want to develop, they want to innovate. And unfortunately, in this world that we're working on, we have prioritized speed and efficiency over value creation and innovation. Got a book coming out next year, and it's called We've Lost the Plot, because I think the majority of us have lost the plot based on the complexity around us of the main thing of business. And then finally, compliance protects trust. We're going to talk about this. AI is rewriting the entire rules of compliance. And that's causing any lawyers in the room a lot of headaches. But the reality is we can no longer ensure that people will do the right thing through compliance. Now, as much as I can dog on those belief statements, the playbook worked. And that is the reality. That brought us to where we are today. Because we were operating in a very different environment, the #1 thing that AI is going to disrupt, as I've already stated, is information and intelligence. So what does that mean when that actually becomes democratized? That means that we can no longer rely on control, efficiency, or expertise as our levers as leaders, because those things don't work anymore. I can have as much control, I can have my 3-year roadmap and plan, I can have my talent development in place, but 1 year from now, 1 month from now, something traumatic might change and disrupt everything I know. And there goes the entire model, and I'm back to reinventing. And so the reality is, if you're leading today, if you're still hoping to lead and motivate and get through this turbulent time by doing the same thing that you did 5 years ago, I'm here to tell you, all of the research is glaring red, it will not work. And I think that's the one thing that's difficult, and some things that I work on a lot with leaders, is almost grieving the past. And I know Mike has said it multiple times, nostalgic is starting to come back. I see nostalgia coming back in all the wrong ways in leadership today. Of how do we get back to the way things were pre-pandemic? How do we get back to how things used to work? That world no longer exists. And I think my point today, and what I'd ask you to reflect on, is grieve that world and let go, because that world's not coming back. And the question becomes, as Mike was saying, how do we actually change and disrupt who we are and how we show up so we get this moment right today? And I want to share with you this example and this story because I think it illustrates so well where you all are today. Does anyone happen to know who this is on the screen by chance? Not Sully. I heard some Sully. I would be impressed. This is Captain Jacob. He was an airline pilot for KLM back in the 70s. And I know I'm speaking to the hospitality industry, so I'm sure many of you are aware of this story. But Captain Jacob wrote the playbook for safety standards in the airline industry. We're still playing by most of them today. He recognized that crew and pilots needed time to actually come off. They couldn't just be flying 24/7. They needed rest periods. And he really began to understand what is required to have high performance as a pilot. And he completely changed the entire aviation industry. In fact, he was so popular, KLM actually put him on as a primary spokesperson and marketing materials, so because people actually wanted to go fly a plane with Captain Jacob. The problem is, it was a date in 1977, and it was not business as usual. He was supposed to be flying to London, but unfortunately there was a bomb threat, and so instead he got rerouted to the island of Tenerife. And now this was Tenerife not today, this was Tenerife back in 1977. Low infrastructure, no hotels, no sorts of restaurants, nothing going on. And the problem is, he was in a 747. These runways were meant for the small prop planes that were flying in for local travel. And so he, alongside many other 747s, were diverted because of the bomb threat. To make matters worse, Captain Jacob was coming across his delayed time where he was going to have to get in the air within the next hour, or else he'd have to go into the mandatory rest period that he himself had actually instituted. And not just that, to make matters worse, there was a storm rolling in over Tenerife at the exact same time. Captain Jacob had a decision to make in this moment. He was irritated, he was probably hungry, he was tired and exhausted and had to get back on the air. And he became super agitated. Instead of listening to his first officer, instead of listening to his crew, he actually began to turn back on the engines and begin to take off. And the problem is, because he wasn't listening, because he was in such a hurry to get back in the air, what he failed to see in front of him was another 747 sitting right on the runway. That day continues to be the most tragic day in airline history. Over 550 people lost their lives that day. And this is from Captain Jacob, who is the leading safety aviation pilot in the industry. And so my warning to you today is, I don't care how great you've done for the last 15, 20 years. We are all in a Tenerife moment right now. Whether that's AI, whether that's Gen Z, whether that's the macroeconomic turbulence, whether it's the geopolitical instability, the reality is we have all showed up on the island of Tenerife, tired, exhausted. No one wants to talk about the pandemic anymore, but who is still exhausted from that whole period of life and still trying to figure out what that was? And so that's the reality is, and how are we going to change the way we lead so we don't become Captain Jacob, whose legacy should have been actually changing an entire industry towards safety, and instead is going to go down as creating the largest aviation disaster of our time. And that's what I want to give to you today, is an understanding of where you need to focus and where you need to begin to shift as a leader. So the reality is the center of gravity has shifted as a leader. So maybe this anxiety or this pressure that you're feeling is not in your head. It is very real. If we think about leadership, You take a look at the bars that are dotted here as kind of the then. We weren't really talking too much about longevity. What does it mean when people start having 100-year lives, and what does that mean from an aging workforce perspective? You really weren't worried about AI disruption, I'm gonna guess 3 to 5 years ago. Probably wasn't on anyone's top 5 list. Really, there was not tons of talk about burnout. That became really much more of a hot topic, I would say, during the pandemic, where we began to bring much more mental health awareness into the workplace. And instead, I think the majority of the conversation for most leaders was around employee loyalty and employee retention. How do I make sure I engage my workforce and retain them? And obviously in the most cost-effective way possible. Instead, you now have a lot of messy human issues going on that you are having to deal with that are now directly impacting your ability to generate revenue. And that's the difference, is you are no longer just a leader in your industry. You have to now become much more of a societal leader and understand the generational shifts taking place, understanding the geopolitical environment and how that's impacting your workforce. This is stuff that I guarantee no one has learned in school, and unless you're a psychologist here, you all are now being asked to serve as a psychologist within your organizations if you're a people leader. And I want to share with you a personal story of why this matters to me so much, of making sure that you as leaders are prepared for this time. I actually started off my career as an HR generalist, as an HR business partner. I was in the financial services industry. This was right around 08, 09, coming out of the financial crisis. And I was at the Hartford at the time, and I was supporting our CFO. And I got into HR because I thought, well, if I'm gonna do something in business, I wanna do something great. And so let me go into the department that's gonna develop and engage people and go make the world a better place. Showed up, young Kelly shows up to get her first assignment, and I'm like, all right, what kind of leadership development program am I gonna build? And they said, well, actually, Kelly, we have really started looking at the balance sheet. Things are tight right now. We're coming out of financial crisis. Just like the growth that you're seeing here, there's low to no growth environment. We need to figure out some other solutions. Our labor costs are too high. And at the time, there was a technology, I don't know if any of you are using it in your hotel systems, called robotic process automation. Let's call it like a baby AI version. And we decided that we can actually use robotic process automation in the back office, and your first job is to go eliminate 200 people. Any of you guys ever have to do reduction in workforce? Anyone has done that? There's something that changes fundamentally inside of you when you have to do that. I don't care how much of a business decision is, how rational the economics of that decision are, there is something that fundamentally shifts when you have to tell people they no longer have a position. And so that's what I had to do, and those were back in the days we were doing this in person, and we had a 12-hour day, and I looked 200 people in the eye, one by one, to let them know that they no longer had a job. And when I say they no longer had a job, I mean the robotic process automation system was being installed the next day and being turned on, and we no longer need these people to show up to work. And I think what pained me the most is, in hindsight, is two things. One, someone showed up the next day. The IT forgot to turn off her badge, and she was sitting on her computer, still going. And I had to go up to her and I said, Debbie, I'm sorry, you're no longer needed. I need you to exit the building. And she goes, I can't. I have to finish my work. I have to finish this process. There's no way my job could be done. I've been here 30 years. This can't be true. And it was this heartbreaking moment of anyone who says work is just about a paycheck. I will argue that all day, every day. Pay is super important, but so is the meaning and identity that we have to work. Second thing is, that haunts me to this day, that I almost want to share and project a little bit of this haunting on you because I think we're in the same moment, is this other woman came to me and said, Kelly, if you knew about this robotic process automation, why didn't you tell us about it? Why didn't you train us on this? You're now sending me out in a market. I have none of the technical skills required. I have this domain expertise that's now becoming outdated. Why didn't you tell us about this? And that's the question I'm asking audiences all around the world right now, is we have to tell people about AI and what it's going to do. Because what robotic process automation did about 15, 20 years ago is going to seem so minuscule compared to what AI is about ready to do and rock the workforce. We've talked a lot about seeing this economy split between ultra luxury and economy, and we continue to see this. We're going to see this play out in the labor markets to the same degree. AI is going to create a widening of inequality in the ability to access jobs. And it's going to be the first time in our modern work history that technology is coming for the white-collar professional. And so as you saw Mike's chart with the vocational trades, it makes perfect sense to me. That is where the jobs are moving to. And we as people, as a society, have to make a decision. How do we bring more dignity and value to those type of roles? How do we make people say, yes, I do want to be a plumber. Yes, I want to be a chef. yes, I want to do these things because these are not going to be susceptible to AI, as a lot of the white-collar work that's taking place today is in the coming months. So I'm here to prepare people so I don't have to look someone in the eye again and say, I didn't know that this technology was coming, because AI is here and it's changing the game. The problem is AI is coming at potentially the worst possible time in our economic history. The reason is, and I have to actually, this slide is so outdated, and I just made this about a month and a half ago. We are seeing unprecedented economic shocks everywhere we go. And so if you take a look, again, I'm coming from tech, and I don't know if this rocked the world, probably not as much in hospitality, but when Silicon Valley Bank folded out of nowhere earlier in 2023, it completely changed the landscape, and no one saw it coming. You then moved on, and we've always talked about the inflation and interest rates. Then we had ChatGPT launch. We then have all of these CrowdStrike outages. We had an AWS one a couple weeks ago. And all of this is leading to this really, in the longest US government shutdown, we are seeing things as leaders that I would say you should see this series over your entire career, not 18 months. And that's the problem, is these shocks are coming too frequently. And there's nothing we can do about it besides get ready for them. And so I think one of the things we have to realize is in the backdrop of all of the shocks, of all this disruption, AI is going to completely change the way that we think about work and leadership. I want to share with you what AI is actually doing as an undercurrent right now that's only going to continue to accelerate as businesses move beyond understanding large language models, ChatGPT and Copilot, and actually begin to use AI like you saw as a digital counterpart, and actually beginning to create digital twins within your systems. So number one thing you have to realize is knowledge is no longer power. That is completely flipped upside down. AI intelligence is going to make really intelligence itself a commodity. But what becomes power? It's your soft skills that we don't really like to talk about a lot because it feels too woo-woo for many of us. But the reality is wisdom, empathy, morality, judgment. Let me ask you this. When's the last time you've trained for those skills in your workforce? When is the last time that you taught wisdom? How you become wise, how you become discerning. You saw my digital avatar, and I was joking with the AV guys. They're like, are you sure that wasn't you? And I said, I swear to God, never recorded that. How are you then going to know what's real and what's fake in the coming future? That's the type of skill sets that we need to start embodying now, today, so you're not behind the next 3 to 5 years. Number two, hierarchy no longer is making sense for many organizations, and that's because it's too slow. There's too much bureaucracy in that. We're seeing a lot more speed happen from bottoms up, people who are using AI tools to spread information. Information in your organization is moving way beyond your hierarchy, and I think that's going to be a challenge for many of us. As we mentioned, productivity, being able to predict is no longer possible. I can't tell you, as much as everyone asks me what's going to happen in the next 18 months. I don't know, but I know my slide's going to have to be updated. Those shocks are going to no longer be relevant because it's going to be something else. Other challenging thing is transparency is going to no longer come from oversight. AI, to many of us, feels like a black box. Does AI still feel a little bit like a mystery machine to some degree of still coming through? That's the problem. That's not going to change anytime soon, and that black box is going to only get darker. And so what do you do as organizational leaders when AI starts making decisions alongside your human colleagues and you don't know the algorithm or the parameters that have been set? Who's responsible? Who's accountable? These are the questions we have to start asking, because as you see the next one, decision-making is no longer going to be human. Next one is, and this is really scary for some industries, is that organizations are no longer closed systems. If you're connected into OpenAI, if you're connected into Microsoft or Google Gemini, there is so much data sharing that's happening back and forth. You are no longer part of a closed ecosystem. And that's just something I think we have to begin to accept as one of the unintended consequences of this. And then finally, so many leaders are where they are today because they have learned how to build kingdoms within their organizations. They have managed the most amount of people. Do you know what the leader of the future is going to be rewarded for? Smaller teams. Those who can actually minimize. I mean, you heard from Mike earlier, cost and labor cost are going to be continuing under pressure, and those that can begin to actually, whether that's through attrition, layoffs, whatever that begins to occur, but that is going to become the future of work, is how do you manage and create the same guest experiences with less people utilizing AI. These are the new rules, and this changes everything that we know about leadership today. This is uncharted territory. And here's the problem that I have with this. We are not investing enough in the people side. And now, I don't know how your industry has fared coming out of COVID. But I will tell you the one thing that I have seen almost consistently across every industry, training budgets are down. People development is down. Many are in survival mode of trying to keep the cash still high in the balance sheets. And as a result, we are cutting the development at a very time that we actually need to be doubling down and investing in people. So here's what's happening right now. One, executives have no clue what AI, in some regards, what AI really is, and who within their workforce has the AI skills. Many have landed in Tenerife flying blind. We don't know, actually, what is an AI skill? What does that look like? Only 1 in 4 organizations today actually have a formal AI technical training program in place to help workers augment their job, not be automated away from a job. That is a key difference, and only 1 in 4 organizations today are actually getting that right. So what's happening because of this reality? 50% of leaders are not happy with their AI investments. They don't think it's working. They don't think their workers are getting productivity gains. And I would argue it's partly because we're not investing on the right side. And not just that, and I don't know if you feel this at all, especially more maybe in some of your office knowledge roles, the majority of the workers today are petrified of losing their job. There is a sense of fear that I have not seen in a very long time with the technology that is ready to be extremely disruptive. Do you know right now what the 3rd highest unemployed college degree is right now? Anthropology is number 1, which may not be a huge surprise. Number 2 is like psychology. Number 3, computer science. Who would have thought 20 years ago computer science would actually be one of the most highest unemployed college educated professions right now for those aged 21 to 25? So when people say, what should I tell my child? Should they go get a STEM degree? I say this, you have 2 choices. You either really become an AI expert and you learn a strong domain and know how to build AI, or you go and go into the trades and really kind of bypass that, because those are the 2 pathways that are beginning to form right now in our labor force. And I think this is going to be a really hard reality many of us are facing. And so my other problem I have right now is companies get so excited about installing AI into the workforce. I've never seen such an emphasis on efficiency, and I've never seen such a losing of the plot when it comes to AI. Everyone wants to become an AI company. Even my book publisher the other day said, oh, Kelly, we're not just a book publisher anymore. We're an AI company. And I'm like, what does that even mean, you know? But here's the reality is, because everyone has this narrative or this desire to cross the AI valuation bridge, if you can prove to your industry that you are now an AI-enabled hotel, 2x valuation on your hotel, whether that's true or not, but that is what's happening right now in the markets. And what's happening is, because leaders are so eager to get AI in their workforce, they're installing it in all the wrong places. Take a look at this stat from Stanford that just came out. 41% of tasks that companies are using AI to automate for are actually the tasks that people still want to do. This is a mismatch that's going to create a lot of angst and trouble for us in the workplace. And not just that, this is the part of the presentation that I would say is probably of the highest alarm. If I had a red bell on here, I'd probably be sounding it right here. I did this research over this summer. I wanted to understand who are the highest performer AI people in your organization. I want to understand, who are they? What are they doing? Who is actually getting this AI moment right? And I looked at the top 25% of these AI users. These were people using AI to actually have productivity gains. Here's what they said in our survey-based research. 88% of top AI performers are twice as likely to feel burned out and quit your organization. 67% trust AI more than the human colleague. 64% say they have a better relationship with AI than with their teammates. I'm going to let that land for a second, because when I was doing this, as a researcher, my background's in statistics, so I was looking at the data, and I had an analyst working with me, and I said, give me the data. I need to cut this to make sure that this is correct. And it was. And I don't know about you. I don't want to live in a world where this is where we're headed. I don't want to live in a world where we are even more addicted to our devices, even more addicted to something that's quite frankly artificial, giving us artificial connection, artificial empathy, and yet saying, I'd rather work with that than a human colleague. And that's the world we're actually creating, whether we want to or not, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now, to raise the alarm and say we have to take a time out and figure out where does AI fit within our organizations, and how do we do so in a way that not only displaces people from jobs, but that it doesn't also cause disconnection amongst us in the workplace. And that is the fear. As you think about AI, and especially those of you who are excelling in the customer experience, as you think about AI, it's going to take you further away from your customer, human-to-human contact, and it's also taking you further away from your workforce. So it's no surprise then Gen Z is coming into this world, and 47% of them are saying, I would actually rather have coaching and performance be done through ChatGPT than my manager. So this is why I say we have a profound leadership crisis in our organizations today, and that no matter how difficult it is from a macroeconomic environment, if you don't start fixing this is going to become the #1 problem. Not inflation, not in tariffs, not even the revenue. This is going to become the problem that makes or breaks you in the future. So let's take a moment and talk about Gen Z. How many of you are managing Gen Zers today? So most. Do we have any Gen Zers in the room? I always like to qualify that too before moving forward. So at the same time, now we have this digitally native generation coming in. Has any of you looked around and thought maybe similar to the 1955s, like what's going on with Gen Z? Do they really want to work? You know, do they want to come into an office? Do they not? You know, we're having all these debates. Here's what I want to do. I want to bust through all that and just say, here's the reality of what Gen Z is actually walking into. We have a crisis on our hands that the majority of young workers today do not think business is causing good anymore in our society. Most of them actually think businesses are actively harming society. That's a problem. That's a mindset shift that's going to become a really big deal as we try to think about attracting and retaining workers. Here's the great news with your industry. Hospitality has a fantastic reputation with the young generation. And so I do think you are at a leg up compared to maybe the tech industry or compared to energy industry. So I think you need to, as you're thinking about retraining and attracting Gen Z, how do you lean into this as an industry that you are providing good, that you're providing positive benefit to local communities? Problem is the #1 generation and cohort struggling in work today, Gen Z. Only 31% of them say they actually are thriving and understanding the world of work. The majority of them are completely lost. Top 2 concerns, cost of living and finding a job. Very real concerns when you think about what they have. And not just that, we continue to see Gen Z as saying they're struggling to perform in a work environment. It's almost like we're trying to fit a circle through a square hole right now, trying to get Gen Z, because they see the old leadership playbook still in power and at reign, and it doesn't fit the reality. They're in Tenerife. They're trying to figure out what's happening, and we keep trying to give them a predictable, controllable model that we deep down know is not going to work. And so here's the reality, if what Gen Z is facing with. The American dream has gotten out of their reach. So any of you who don't spend time on TikTok, Instagram Reels, whatever, go take a look. Gen Z is loud right now about what they actually think is happening with the American dream. #1, just take a look at these increases. This is from the Economic Policy Institute. Over the last 30 plus years, price of a house has increased 1,700%. I mean, that is wild when you think about it. Regular prices of goods and services, just to kind of anchor us, was about 567% during that time. Price of an education, 1,800%. It's becoming unaffordable to actually have this pathway. And here's the uncomfortable truth that Gen Z is taking to TikTok and raging about. CEO pay during the same time period has been able to keep on par and on pace. A lot of this is driven because of equity in publicly traded companies and grants and stock. Average workforce, 18%. This did just tick up to 24% last month. They came out with a new report, but we moved the needle from 18 to 24. This is the problem that Gen Z is walking into that provides some of the, let's call it lack of motivation that you may be seeing from them. So let me play a quick clip and see if this resembles any of the Gen Zers you're working with today.
We're trying to get a feel for how people spend their day at work. So if you would you walk us through a typical day for you?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I generally come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door. That way Lumberg can't see me. And after that, I just sort of space out for about an hour. Till I'm
Space out?
Yeah, I just stare at my desk, but it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably another hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a given week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work.
Peter, would you be a good sport and indulge us and just tell us a little more?
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you something about TPS reports.
TPS stands for?
The thing is, Bob, it's not that I'm lazy. It's that I just don't care.
Don't care?
It's a problem of motivation, all right? Now, if I work my ass off and Initech ships a few extra units, I don't see another dime. So where's the motivation?
And here's something else, Bob. I have 8 different bosses right now.
Beg your pardon?
8 bosses.
8?
8, Bob. So that means that when I make a mistake, I have 8 different people coming by to tell me about it. That's my only real motivation, is not to be hassled. That and the fear of losing my job. But you know, Bob, that'll only make someone work just hard enough not to get fired.
We laugh about that now, but the reality is that is what the millennials began to embody, and that is certainly the mindset that Gen Z has today. It's not that they're lazy, they just don't care because they don't see a pathway forward. So I think one of the most dangerous things that we have happening today in our workforce, not just AI, but it's actually that we have a generation of workers coming up who have lost hope at how the corporations actually work and how leadership works. If you take a look at this data, again from Gallup, 60% say they actually think businesses are purposely lying to them and misguiding them. This is only going to get worse with AI. You might have heard the term AI slop that's happening. But as AI continues to fill feeds, this is going to continue to be worse. And not just that, Gen Z right now is saying 33% are ready to quit in the next 6 months. And Susie Welsh, who is married to the former late Jack Welch, did a whole study on this 2 months ago. Has a great piece in the New York Times. And what she found through her research was that Gen Z is the very first generation to have lost hope. They're not even sure, as she did her interviews, whether the world's going to be around in the next 20 to 30 years. Are they entering into World War III? Are they entering into more and more climate change and disasters? Is there going to even be enough money to go around? Is there going to be enough jobs to go around? Or is AI going to take care of all of that? That, to me, is probably one of the most dangerous mindsets we could have of a young generation that we need to speed up to productivity to actually starting to grow business and innovation again. And so that's some of the underlying elements that you're seeing in Gen Z today. And so I want to conclude and end with this as I go through the next section here of what is the new leadership playbook. I'm going to take a hot take here. I actually don't think resiliency is the answer. How many of you have thought about resiliency or thought about, I'm just going to need to be a resilient leader? Apparently one of the hottest keynote speaking topics is how to become a resilient leader. I don't think resiliency is enough anymore. And the reason is I think the shocks are too frequent and I think the future is too unknown. And let me break it down for you like this. There's 3 states that we all have in our organization as we begin to map them out. We start off as fragile. Now, I'm from Rochester, New York, so this Kodak one hits me very hard. But during the digital shock, Kodak, they're still in existence, but no longer the leading industry anymore. And the reason is they created the digital camera. They had the patent. They had the expertise. But their culture and leadership failed to be able to reinvent themselves around that. And because they couldn't get their leadership to reimagine what that might look like, they decided to sell that, and it became a very fragile business afterwards. Now, how many of you are familiar with the grocery chain Kroger? This is a great example of resiliency. Kroger, during the pandemic, went all in on having groceries delivered. It's still a thriving business model, but their core products stayed the same, but their delivery mechanism changed of how they did that. I think that's great. Resiliency is where we at least need to start with. But I want to challenge you and ask you to think through, as you think about hotel space and the changing customer behaviors, what does your business actually look like transformed or completely different than what you're thinking about today? How do you think about empty meeting spaces completely transformed, you serving a different purpose than maybe you've ever thought of before? That is the challenge of the leaders who are going to make it over the next 5 to 7 years, are going to be those that transform parts of their business to capture this opportunity. The example I have right now is Netflix, and then they just bought, WB. So they're continuing to reinvent themselves. But as we all know, Netflix went from mail home order DVDs quickly pivoted then to streaming services, and now you know what their #1 revenue is? Movie studio. They are now one of the biggest movie studios and actually producing their own content. And now they're gonna buy WB, and who knows, there's some talks of them getting into the actual on-site entertainment experience. Anyone from Philadelphia? Because Netflix just opened up their Netflix House, which is their on-site entertainment. So they're continuing to reinvent themselves as the customer shifts and as the business world changes. And so again, what does that Netflix model look like for your industry? And I want to leave you with this playbook because there's a new language that we need to start adopting within our workplaces. Again, I'm going to challenge you, and you're going to get these slides, so I'm not going to go through it and read this all off, but we need to move from efficiency to flexibility. How uncomfortable can you get with giving your workforce flexibility? If you want to attract and retain talent and you want to bring in Gen Z, flexibility is becoming a table stakes. And so how do we, again, as leaders, get a bit uncomfortable, change the old playbook so we can really lean into this? We need to move from this mindset of control, if I gotta control things. I mean, a lot of you, I think, are probably really high type A, that you need to be in control, and that's why you're successful. But the reality is, I ask you to let go of that a bit and think about what do you need to learn right now. This is a learning moment we all need to be in, and we need to lessen the control a bit. We need to move from oversight to empowerment. I can almost predict your answer to this question. I can almost predict the culture within your organization. If I ask you, do you think the majority of people today want to work? Is that yes or no? See, I heard a little bit 50-50, a little bit of both. It's usually about a 50-50 answer. It's an inherent belief that we all have. And those beliefs, as Mike was constantly saying, actually drive our behavior. And so if you don't trust your workforce, or you don't trust that people actually really want to work, you're going to lead very differently than someone who says, no, actually, I think my job is to cultivate the right environment because I think people are going to do the right thing on behalf of my organization. That mindset matters greatly. So I encourage you to debate that over lunch. The other thing is we have to move right now from expertise to curiosity. I want you to get really curious about the world and what's happening around you. There's a lot that's happening. There's a lot of shifts. There's a lot of polarization. How do we get curious about what's happening so we have that learning mindset? And then I want to tease out, because tomorrow we'll be doing a workshop to go really much deeper on how you begin to think about AI. So I want to give you a little bit of a preview of that to tease out the workshop. I know I'm competing with swimming with horses and catamarans, but those who want to double down and learn about AI, I'm here for it. I don't know, maybe we'll make it fun. But everyone's talking about AI. I need AI skills. So I want to give you a little bit of a preview of some of the stuff we're going to talk about tomorrow in the workshop. When you talk about AI skills, these are the 3 things you actually need to be looking for in your company right now. Number 1, strong domain expertise. Does anyone know the average error rate of the best performing large language model out there right now? 12%. The best you can do is still going to be wrong 12% of the time. Where are you comfortable putting a 12% error rate into your operations or business today? Where are you comfortable having guest experience go wrong 12% of the time? Probably very little. And so we have to continue to remain strong in the domain expertise so someone knows when AI has gone off the rails. Number 2, everyone has to have some level of data analytics experience. Jan did a great job today. I mean, clearly an expert, but everyone in this room has to have some level of command of statistics and how data works within your organization. Number 1 reason why AI is not taking off in enterprises is because your data is not ready. You might have it, but it's messy, it's not connected, and very few leaders actually know how to pull it and how to put it together. Data analytics is going to become the number 1 skill set at a leadership level. Third thing, and this is going to be really critical for your industry, is you have to understand when are you going to build your own AI custom tool versus buy one that's already in existence. So you'll see the digital avatar that I showed you, that was a custom tool. I built that. I own that. I control that. It's expensive. It's not always scalable. I'm not going to go build a large language model, though, and have when there's OpenAI and Gemini and all these other tools. And those are going to be decisions you're going to have to constantly make. Where are you comfortable fully having a customized experience for both your workforce and customer with AI versus where you're going to have something that's off the shelf? Huge decisions coming in the next couple years. And so I want to conclude with this. Because the reality is, if I have empathy for any group, as much as I love Gen Z and feel empathetic for them, I feel the most empathy for all of you right now in the room. Because the times are changing so fast, they're faster than our ability to actually keep up as individual leaders. And I know so many of you have done such great work to get to where you are, but I also deeply know that the conditions have changed. But I know your story does not have to be Captain Jacob. There's a different story that we have that we can anchor to, and this is Captain Sully, those of you who had said that before. Captain Sully was also faced with business not as usual. Flock of birds, right, coming in right around that 10, 12,000 altitude. Never happened before in human history. No one else had ever had to grapple with that. And as much as Captain Jacob had moved the safety aviation industry along, he had one key missing component that Captain Sully had. After Captain Jacob's disaster, the aviation industry decided the number one problem is not a lack of technical skills, it's a lack of human skills, interpersonal skills. And so now all pilots have to go through interpersonal communication training to learn how to talk to others and how to handle each other in a crisis. The human relating aspect is what always gets in the way. And not just that, Captain Sully had a redesigned cockpit. They redesigned planes to make it easier to move with more intuition with how someone might respond in a crisis. So Captain Sully had the luxury of those sorts of advancements. Not technical advancements. There's a lot more technology in that plane, but that's not what saved him that day. It was his ability to communicate and relate to one another and get real curious in the cockpit as the disaster was happening. Him and his first officer and the crew were all working together to make sure that they were coming up with an alternative and made a very daring and bold move to go land on the Hudson. And that has now become a miracle story that we tell each other. And so that's where I think we are today. And as you go back into your organizations, I want you to double down on these three questions. I want you to think about them. I want you to talk about it at lunch today, because I think this is how we begin to regain the plot and how we begin to actually regain control. Number one, what value will you create? We've actually lost sight of that. Very few leaders today can tell me what their value proposition is. The world has changed so much. It used to be this in 2019. The pandemic hit. We had to pivot and do all these things. Now we're trying to keep track of inflation and tariffs. Like, we are truly just surviving is the majority of the value proposition for most people. And for most of us, it's also as leaders to continue to increase our pay. But the reality is that's not what's going to motivate the workforce to get up at night. It's not going to motivate your kitchen staff or your hospitality staff who has to come in. And so the question is, what value are you creating? We have to get back to the purpose of business, which is not simply to maximize profits. It's to create value. And so what is that value that you're creating today? And can you articulate it? That's so important. Number two, what behaviors are you normalizing in your workplace? You know, Mike said something to me over this summer, and he said to me, Kelly, I think the way that you have to measure culture is by the worst behavior you're willing to tolerate. And I thought that was profound. And that's something that I've really begun to think about is the worst behavior that you're willing to tolerate is going to become the culture and the defining moments of how people think that they can behave and act. This is going to become really important as we think about motivating people and rewarding people to move and change. We also have to make sure that we're moving together with humanity. And then the third thing is, what will you leave behind? The reality is the majority of workers today think business is causing harm, not good. And so the question is, what side of history of that equation are you going to be on? Will you be remembered of leaving your business better than you inherited, actually creating more jobs, creating more technology within your organizations, creating a better customer and guest experience? Or are you going to just kind of get caught up in it all and just go into survival mode and actually become one of the statistics on the other side of leaving the hotel or the business you have worse off? This is the deciding moment that we're in right now. And so I'm going to leave you with this quote. This is a book that I have, Essential. I'll be talking a little bit more about it in the workshop tomorrow. But this is what I implore you as you think about going off and doing your business. That let this be the legacy of our time in leadership. That we were the ones who stood up for humanity in the workplace, who recognized that our greatest asset is not our product or service, but how we impact our people. And I know I heard loud and clear that people are your biggest cost, but I ask you to reframe that today. Your people are also your biggest asset, and they will be the ones that bring you into the future. And so I'd love to connect with you. I am a researcher, do a future of work advisory firm. Context matters so greatly. I've given you the 30,000-foot altitude of what's happening, but if you're interested in learning more and going deeper, I'm here with leading authorities and would love to be able to come into your organization and actually get deeper into the context so we can help problem solve and make sure that you as leaders are able to leave this legacy behind. And with that, I'm going to invite Mike back up and hopefully get you guys closer to lunch.
All right,
Thanks,
thank
Mike.
you.